A lot of people have questions about unschooling, and there are a lot of misconceptions floating around. I'm Sue Patterson from Unschooling Mom2Mom, and today I want to talk with you about the facts and the fiction surrounding unschooling. So we'll start with the facts. What is unschooling? Unschooling isn't always an easy thing to define. Families are unique and they apply some aspects of unschooling, but not others. It's really okay because everybody should do what's best for their families. But I want to share what I've seen work in unschooling homes and how we've interpreted it. It always helps for everybody to be on the same page to start with, and then they can adjust whatever they need. So what is unschooling? It's simply living a full, rich life, offering opportunities to your child to learn and grow. Children are natural learners. They want information, and they don't necessarily know what's out there in the world. But unschooling parents trust that all humans are wired to learn. So for unschooling to work at its best, the parent must be engaged with the child, probably more than if they chose any other learning modality. Connecting with them is a priority. And that's the parent's role in unschooling. The unschooling parent keeps one ear to the child, listening for their interests and their questions, and the other to the community, and now with the internet, the world, searching for creative opportunities that feed that desire to learn more about a topic. And before you say, hey, that's just good parenting, I would agree that many good parents do this on Saturdays or in the summer or during school breaks. But unschooling parents do it full time. And they recognize the benefits of doing this full time. Learning only happens when the learner is engaged. If the learner's not engaged, an incredible amount of time is wasted. Wasted time on lesson preparation, as well as wasted time on trying to impart knowledge to somebody that's only halfway listening. I've heard people say that you can't pour knowledge into a child's head and expect it to stick. And yet that's what we think is going to happen, right? That's how schools act, that they're going to pour this knowledge in and they're going to all come out with all the knowledge. When in fact, this is what often happens with all that pouring. You know what it's like to sit there and read a book and then realize, oh gosh, I haven't even paid attention to the last few sentences. You have to be engaged for your mind to grab what's going on. So here are the key points that everybody agrees when we say the word unschooling, that unschooling is not school. Unschoolers have broken free from the notion that curriculum and scope and sequences are necessary. They've realized that quizzing and grading and artificially dividing life up into subjects are props that schools use. It's familiar to us because most of us went to school. But that's about the mechanics of school, not the essentials of learning. Opportunities abound in everyday life for parents and children to interact on a variety of topics. It's very clear to parents whether the child grasps what they're talking about. A real conversation allows for the topic to be explored and expanded upon. And certainly this is a richer assessment than any 10-question quiz on Friday. One could even question the necessity of quizzing at all. When we as adults want to learn something, we simply explore the resources, we read, we practice. We don't set up quizzes for ourselves to see what we learned. We simply learn. Quizzes were set up to replace conversations that would find out how much a child knows. And they're poor substitutions. Setting up the learning plan is an aspect of teaching, not learning. Teachers need lesson plans to be able to show their principal that they're keeping on track with their predetermined curriculum plan. These are contraptions that the teaching profession needs in schools, but we don't need them in homes. And because in unschooling, the focus is on the child's learning and not the teacher's teaching, they're completely unnecessary. So if that's what unschooling isn't, what is unschooling? It's about fueling curiosities and partnering with your child. It's knowing when to nudge and when to let them figure out the next steps. This comes from being a good listener and observer. The more you're around your child and not just rushing them from activity to activity, the easier this becomes. You help them navigate through their world because it really is their path, not ours. You help them find resources for their interests because we have more life experience. We know how to dig around and find things that they might not know about. We create an environment that makes learning and life all woven together, and there's no reason to separate it. This was school's big idea, to separate kids from families and real life. I don't think it's been that great of an experiment. So the two big takeaways about knowing what are the facts about unschooling are that there's an emphasis on the learner and not the teacher and the teaching, and the idea of trust. That parents trust the biology. They know that kids are naturally curious and they want to learn. Unschooling is about trusting yourself and trusting your child, and that takes a good amount of nerve. When the parent sends a child to school or even decides to go with a particular curriculum, they're handing over their trust and their child to the school and the curriculum. A leaving it to them mentality can set in, and for many families this is a relief. But unschooling families don't want to go that route. They're willing to shoulder the responsibility for the education of their child because they have faith that learning is something that humans naturally want to do, and their children are no exception to this rule. So then we come to the fiction. What are the things that people say about unschooling that are not true? We have myths, right? So let's debunk some of them. The first one that always comes up is that people think that, the homeschooling is only for the ultra-religious or the hippies. And as for unschooling, they kind of think of that as more in-your-face activist types. But the reality is that people choose to homeschool for so many different reasons these days. Unschooling families come in all shapes and sizes, from various political and religious and racial and economic backgrounds. Unschooling parents are problem solvers. They saw a problem with how learning and education is approached, and they sought a solution. The next myth is that people think they're going to have to duplicate school, and that that's going to be a really hard, tedious thing to do, because remember, they don't remember school that fondly. So they're thinking this would be really crummy to have to be the one to bring that. And that's not true at all. That learning doesn't have to look the way school says it does. Many more creative ways exist. In fact, educational research shows that many of the ways schools are educating children are not the best practices. Unschoolers don't have the constraints of a bureaucracy or a system that has all sorts of other agendas. Instead, unschoolers can learn more about how children actually learn. They can see what works for their kids and truly create an individualized approach to learning. By following interests, expanding on strengths, and looking at learning as an adventure instead of drudgery, unschooled children are able to have a very different experience than those schooled children, or those of us that went to school. So the next myth, people think, what if I can't fill all the gaps in their learning? What are we going to do about that? The truth is, everybody has gaps. Nobody can really fill all the gaps. And when you discover one, there's always Google or Siri or YouTube or Alexa. Remember, there's no real deadline for learning. We have our entire lives to learn anything we want. And something else to remember, when I was in school, Google, cell phones, Netflix, PowerPoints, YouTube, none of those things existed. Who knows what's going to be around by the time our kids are grown? Better to help them learn how to find and use the resources that are available to them than to be stuck memorizing rote facts that are easily accessed if they ever need them. The next myth is that opportunities are going to be lost, that doors are going to close, and the opposite is true. Mentoring, internships, travel, real-world involvement, they're all available to unschoolers. They can access anything whenever they have an interest that they'd like to pursue. They're not forced to do it just after 5 o'clock or before 9 p.m. or only on Saturdays. They have their whole week. The community is constantly at their fingertips. And if it's college that you're worried about, I can tell you that unschoolers attend college all around the world. In fact, colleges are eager to have them because they bring such a different outlook about learning. And they've had childhoods filled with all sorts of rich experiences. We've talked with attendance officers who say they want to see applicants who look different, who aren't exactly the cookie cutter of everybody else around them. So when your child has had an unschooled adolescence, they've had opportunities to expand and grow and learn about particular interests that then they want to maybe go to college and pursue a little bit more. Colleges are thrilled that they have that kind of experience and they know what they're coming for. There's another myth that unschooled children grow up with no rules, no structure. They've never heard the word no. How can that prepare them for the real world? And the reality is, we're not raising feral children. Life gives all kinds of opportunities for structure and limits. What unschooling parents do is they remove the arbitrary limits. Unschooling parents find ways to say yes to some part of their request because they're all about partnering with their children to help them navigate their world. We all have financial or time-related limits, and I'm sure there's more categories than that, but those come to mind as the most logical. And unschoolers learn to work within budgets and also get the chance to build on curiosities or even pursue dreams. And more importantly, they have the opportunity to practice, to see what happens if they put the limits in different places. We believe that learning this in a partnership better prepares them than when they're off on their own without us as a safety net. So another myth is that we need an expert. But the reality is parents know their kids best. Resources are available in any area, including friends and relatives and even people you meet in passing within your community. And I really do believe that schools conditioned us to not trust ourselves. And we have this opportunity to break that cycle. The next myth is that unschooling is expensive, that it's only for the rich. And it's only expensive if you make it so. It doesn't have to be at all. The internet, libraries, group activities all give children opportunities to learn more. Sure, you can spend a lot, but you can also be very frugal. And any time that you're trying to be frugal, you know that's going to take a little effort, but it's doable. Lots of times it's about shifting your priorities or pooling resources and making adjustments. If a parent sees the value in this type of education, they're going to find a way. The next myth is that unschooled or homeschooled kids must be very lonely. The truth is, support groups are everywhere. It's often just under the radar. Often when you start to look for others, you notice that they've been there all along, you just didn't know. Community activities offer opportunities to meet people who share your interests instead of just sitting next to you in the desk beside you. Desk proximity is not the best way to make friends, but sharing interests is. Conferences and get-togethers happen all over the country, even the world. Many ways exist to make friends. And if you live in a more remote location, the internet can help you find a way to connect with others who share your interests. Parents just get creative about how kids can meet other kids or adults. The myth is that they're not prepared for the real world. And the reality is they're actually more prepared because they're living in the real world every day. They're not waiting for the bell to ring or the magic age of 18 to occur so they can start their life. The myth is that parents have to be disciplined and organized and have drive and knowledge and credentials. And that's not the reality at all. The reality is what's needed is creativity, resourcefulness, flexibility, a sense of adventure, and enjoying being with your children. So now you know. this is the facts and the fiction about unschooling. You can read more at suepatterson.com/blog. It's got all the articles that I've written for years. And also ways on how we could work together if you need a little more support. And Unschooling Mom2Mom.com is another website that I have that's a curated site that I've collected really the best writings from unschoolers around the world, actually. So you've got two good resources to go from here, and I will put some links down below for you. If you want to hear more about how to unschool, hit the subscribe button. We'll be talking about unschooling every week right here. And if you want to get notifications whenever I upload new videos about unschooling, hit the little bell icon. Thanks for listening, and happy unschooling.